Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, it dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heat is gone. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining.
Conley now with three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. Ja Morant. Insanity.
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. On today's episode, we will talk about the Grizzlies' schedule release as the NBA released the regular season schedule for everyone. Also, by the way, the Grizzlies released their preseason schedule. They might have been the last team to do that. Also, on today's episode, I'll talk about Jaren Jackson Jr. and Team USA playing another exhibition game. And did you know that during Ja Morant's suspension, the Grizzlies can add an extra player to the roster? That is something we're going to talk about on today's episode, while mainly focusing on the schedule release. Today's episode is brought to you again by Underdog Fantasy. You probably already know if you click the link in this episode's description or use my promo code FBBF. Underdog will match your opening deposit. They will double that opening deposit up to $100. But they're also running an additional promotion. This goes for the Colts preseason football game on Saturday, August 19th. They have a higher or lower prediction available for Anthony Richardson's total yards. This is the rookie quarterback for the Colts. If he gets 1 yard passing or rushing or receiving for the game, your prediction will be a winner. And of course, you can pair this offering with other higher or lower predictions to multiply your winnings. So try out Underdog Fantasy, use that promo code FBBF, and take advantage of what I'm going to call this giveaway, where if the Colts quarterback gets any yards, you are a winner. By the way, higher or lower picks are not available in Tennessee, but they are available in most U.S. states. Anyways, the Grizzlies' schedule release, very, very exciting. It whets our appetite for basketball, and we're always looking for what are the big matchups, what are the tough stretches, what are the hardest road trips. I always look to see, hey, what are the good weekend games I could maybe go to? Where are there games where the Grizzlies play back-to-back nights at home? There's actually a lot of them this year. And then we also look at what national TV games did we get? And when is Ja Morant available to play again? And I think that's probably the most interesting thing about the Grizzlies' schedule release. The Grizzlies' 26th game of the season. So Ja suspended 25 games. Their 26th game of the season. This is including the 2 in-season tournament games we don't know much about yet. Their 26th game of the year, oh, by the way, is their first TNT game of the season, and it's against the New Orleans Pelicans. What a coincidence that the Grizzlies' 26th game of the year is going to be on national TV. We're all assuming, fingers crossed, knock on wood, Ja will be available for that matchup. And then looking at the rest of the year, the Grizzlies got a lot of national TV games. You thought maybe with them being kept off of Christmas this year, they're nervous to promote the Grizzlies and Ja Morant, and maybe there's this decision that they're not that interesting of a team, or they're a small market squad that doesn't have that much national interest. No. They're on TV a lot. They have 13 national TV games, only one of them before Ja comes back. So the first 25 games, they're on ESPN one time. The final 57 games, we're talking 12 appearances on either ESPN or TNT. That is the 12th most national TV games for any team this year. So the Grizzlies did not get shunned in any way with those television appearances. The 13 national TV games, that's the second most they've ever had in a single season, behind, of course, last season, when they had 18 games on national TV. Just like last year, though, the large majority of the Grizzlies' national TV games are road games. 9 of the 13 national TV games are going to be on the road. And so when the Grizzlies maybe lose a national TV game, a reminder, don't say, oh man, the Grizzlies always struggle on national TV. No. We're playing really good teams on the road on national TV, which is a tough task. Everyone struggles in those games. So last year, almost all of their national TV games were on the road against playoff teams. Same thing for this year. 9 of 13 national TV games are on the road. One of the home national TV games is the annual Martin Luther King Day game. That will be against the Warriors. So a pretty tough matchup for that one. The season starts with a matchup against the Pelicans, a home game against the Pelicans. That should be very, very exciting. The Pelicans should be a good team, and they, of course, are hoping to get a healthy season out of Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram. That's a tough way to start your season. And then the second game of the year is against the defending world champion Denver Nuggets. So while those are home games, that's a hard start to the season. Now, if you look at the rest of the first 25 games when Ja Morant is not going to be there, I'd say it's not so bad, or it's actually, not very daunting. One of the issues will be that a lot of the games are on the road. So even though you do have a bunch of what you would think are winnable games, like you play the Wizards and the Trailblazers and the Spurs and the Rockets, but yeah, all of them are on the road. So there's the opportunity for the Grizzlies to do just fine, I think, when Ja Morant's not there. But there are a lot of question marks, of course, with this Grizzlies team and how they're going to look without Ja and without mainstays Tyus Jones and Dylan Brooks. And so there certainly is the potential for a rocky start. Again, that opening night against the Pelicans and then playing the Nuggets. Yeah, you like your chances at home. If you remember last year, they never lost a game on Friday or Saturday night at home. But there's certainly a world where they could drop both of those games. And then your third game, you're playing at the Wizards. We think the Wizards are going to be bad. That's our first chance to go up against Tyus Jones. But playing the Wizards on the road, it's the second night of a back-to-back, and it's early in the year. I don't like playing bad teams early in the year. I want to play bad teams at the end of the year. Early year is when people are still trying. You have teams get off to hot starts like the Jazz last year or the Magic a couple seasons ago. Oh, wow. You could imagine saying something like, oh, wow, the Wizards are 5-3. Who would have guessed? So, I don't like having to play bad teams early in the year. And so I know the opening 15, 20 games looks like it's not that tough, and I agree it's not that tough, but a majority of the games are on the road, and you never know what you're going to get from a lot of these teams. So there is the opportunity, I think, to not lose much ground while Ja's out, but there's also the chance that things go kind of poorly and the team gets off to a rocky start. Now, one thing that is positive about the 25 games to start this season where Ja Morant is not available is you don't play that many of the ultra elite teams. I think the best teams in the NBA, and this is consensus opinion, I'm not going out on a limb here, the top teams in the NBA are the Nuggets and the Celtics and Bucks and the Suns and the Lakers and the Warriors, and then maybe the Cavs and the Knicks and the Heat, probably the Sixers, possibly the Kings. Those are the teams that we expect to be home court advantage teams. And you can throw the Grizzlies in there, but we don't get to play ourselves. Those are the teams that have some of the highest Vegas projected win totals. And of those teams, the Nuggets, Celtics, Bucks, Suns, Lakers, Warriors, Cavs, Knicks, Heat, Sixers, and Kings, the Grizzlies only have to play 5 games against those opponents in their first 25 games. So if you look at the schedule that way, you say most of our tougher games are when Ja Morant is back. I don't know if they did that on purpose. I would think they did it more so they could have national TV games against good teams with Ja Morant available. I would imagine they did that on purpose more so than they were like, hey, this team doesn't have Ja. Let's not give him too many hard games early. I don't think that is taken into account whatsoever when they create the schedule. And of course, some other teams that we're not expecting might actually be tremendously good, like Minnesota or New Orleans or the Clippers, the Mavericks. Like, we don't know who's going to be really that good, which is why it's always kind of funny to go through the schedule and try to make any kind of predictions for what it might look like. But I think if you are trying to take some positives, you'd say, okay, only 5 games against the ultra elite teams in those first 25. And so you get a bunch of potentially winnable matchups. Another good thing for the Grizzlies is they have 14 back-to-backs. The 14 back-to-backs is not very good, but 7 of those back-to-backs are home back-to-backs, which are definitely more of an advantageous back-to-back because you don't have to travel at all. You get to sleep in your own bed. And I don't know if the sleeping in your own bed thing matters, but not traveling certainly matters. And the 7 back-to-backs at home, this is quirky and this is way more than normal. I know because I always look as someone who lives in Nashville for, hey, when's the time I could drive to Memphis and catch 2 games in consecutive days? And there normally aren't that many opportunities. It's like 2 a year or 1 a year. There are 7. And I don't know why that occurred, if that's something different the NBA is doing for all teams. I definitely haven't studied every team's schedule to know if these occur frequently across the league. But for whatever reason, there's a bunch of back-to-backs where, hey, I can drive in on Friday. I can watch the Trailblazers twice, Friday and Saturday night in early March. I'm probably not going to do that, but there's a lot of options for that. Another thing about the Grizzlies schedule that actually turned out pretty well for them, in my opinion, is the teams that they ended up only facing 3 times in the West are all pretty decent teams. So, you play the other conference, you play each team twice. And then in your own division, you play everybody 4 times. And then among the rest of the teams in your conference, you play some of them 4, and then you play a few of them only 3 times. Now, this year, the schedule release is only 80 games because of that in-season tournament, where if you end up being one of the 8 teams to qualify for the quarterfinals, well, then the quarterfinals and the semifinals are going to count as your 81st and 82nd games. If you're one of the 22 teams who doesn't make the quarterfinals, well, then you're going to play normal regular season games that week, and we don't know what those matchups are. Now, I am thoroughly confused about how this is going to work. Maybe I just don't get it, and there's something very, very obvious. Maybe I'm the dumbest person in America because I can't figure this out. Maybe no one else cares just about the intricacies of the schedule. But I'm really intrigued how once we figure out which 8 teams are going to the quarterfinals, which 22 teams are not, how they are going to pick who plays who, and then how far of an advance notice you get about those. Every team has 40 home games and 40 road games released right now, which means that week, every team's going to play a home game and a road game. How is it going to work out perfectly that you end up playing only the right people and being able to do a home game? Like, you might have already played a home game against, say, the Celtics, and they're a team in the other conference. So, like, you would assume the NBA is going to try to avoid scheduling the Celtics with the Grizzlies a 3rd time during that week. So I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know if it's all going to work out perfectly, if they have a bunch of scientists and computer programs and algorithms that's going to make it be very, very easy to figure out who you're supposed to play. But it seems like that there's a chance you would end up playing an Eastern Conference team 3 times. You might end up playing a Western Conference team 5 times. So that's going to be weird. And again, maybe there's something really obvious I'm missing. I will always leave that door open, or that possibility open, that I'm missing something obvious. But that's something I'm interested in how it's going to work. But the way I think it benefits the Grizzlies is right now there are 6 teams. They only play 3 times in the West, and all 6 of these teams are pretty good. They only play the Suns and Warriors 3 times. Those are 2 of the best teams in the conference, I believe. They play the Kings 3 times. The Kings, obviously very, very good last year, finishes that 3 seed. And then the Thunder, the Jazz, and the Timberwolves. Now, the Jazz might be bad, but they were very competitive for most of the season last year when they wanted to be. The Thunder and the Timberwolves, I think most people expect them to compete for the playoffs, to probably make the play-in. So if you're picking the teams that you only play 3 times as opposed to 4, you're usually going to pick, like, hey, I'd rather play not the good teams. Like, yeah, you got to play the Nuggets 4 times. You have to play the Lakers 4 times. But I would say Suns and Warriors are the next best teams. and you only have to play them 3 times as of now. Of course, however the in-season tournament goes, whether you make the final 8 or you don't, you're going to end up probably playing at least one of those teams. If it works out perfectly, I think the league would want you to play 2 of those teams that week of the in-season tournament. But again, this is probably something just I care about and no one else cares about. As far as some more analysis of the Grizzlies' schedule, Positive Residual, they do a thing where they feed in the entire league schedule and come up with a bunch of stats and analysis about it. According to Positive Residual, the Grizzlies are tied for the 10th hardest schedule. That does factor in the fact that they only have to play some of these good teams 3 times, but factored into that is the Grizzlies have some of the most rest disadvantage games. That means a game where your opponent is more rested than you based on when did they last play before the matchup. The Grizzlies do have the 5th most rest advantage games, but they're near the very bottom of rest disadvantage games, so that wipes that out. And so Positive Residual thinks the Grizzlies, when they factor in travel and opponent and predicted opponent strength, the Grizzlies will have the 10th most difficult schedule. And again, that's all based on preseason predictions of how good we anticipate teams to be. So it really isn't that important. Also, when we look at like what difficult road trips could occur, like that also I think frequently is not that useful because we've seen times where the schedule looked really difficult for the Grizzlies the past few years and they ended up excelling through those stretches. Although last year there were some daunting spots on the schedule when it came out. We were like, oh, here's a tough road trip. And guess what? The Grizzlies really stumbled through some of those hard road trips last year. They went 1-3 in a 4-game road trip last year that was against the Thunder, Nuggets, Suns, and Warriors. There also was the catastrophic road trip that kicked off with the regular pedestrian game, the collapse against the Lakers. That was an 0-5 road trip where they went to Los Angeles and then Phoenix and then Sacramento and then Golden State and then Minnesota. So that thing did look awful on paper when the schedule came out last year, and it turned out disastrous. Also, you might have forgotten, I kind of forgot, last season the Grizzlies lost 11 out of 12 games on the road at one point. The only win in that stretch was against the Rockets. So despite setting a team record for road victories in the 2021 season, last year they were way less impressive on the road. And while there aren't this year that many like extremely hard road back-to-back-to-backs like a Nuggets, Warriors, Suns that you saw last year, there are some difficult stretches. Like there's a really tough 3-game road trip where they go at the Lakers, at the Suns, at the Mavericks, and then they have to come home after that and play the Clippers, Knicks, and Warriors, and then go back on the road for a 4-game road trip against the Timberwolves, Bulls, Raptors, and Heat. Like that looks like a very rough 10-game stretch, a very hard 10-game stretch in January. Things get a little bit better after that, but near the start of February, you also have a pretty tough stretch where you play the Kings, the Cavs, the Warriors, the Celtics, and Knicks all in a row. Those are 5 of maybe the 10 teams with the highest win total projections this season. So there are some very tough moments, even when Ja Morant gets back in January and early February, that looks very, very hard on the schedule. But then after that, I think things lighten up considerably. Around the All-Star break, they really have the opportunity to take care of business and rack up a bunch of wins. They play a bunch of home games in the middle of February near the All-Star break. They do play that final game before the All-Star break. They play on Thursday night, a TNT game against the Bucks. I think it is a disadvantage to have to play the Thursday night before the All-Star break, especially if Grizzlies players are involved in All-Star weekend. If Ja Morant gets voted there, if Jaren returns there, if Desmond Bane makes his first All-Star appearance, that is something to monitor. But otherwise, it's a schedule. Everyone gets a schedule. There's nothing outrageous. They don't have the most like 3 games in 4-night spans. That's the Clippers. Their schedule turns out just fine for them. I mean, maybe even another bonus is their last 2 games of the year are against the Lakers and Nuggets. And actually right before that, their third to last game is against the Cavaliers. Like, playing the Lakers and Nuggets, I think those are the 2 best teams in the West right now. I'd much rather play them the final 2 games of the year because very frequently those games don't matter at all. Playoff seeding is already locked in. So much like I would rather not play bad teams earlier in the year, I'm totally cool with playing good teams at the very end of the year because maybe you're already locked into your position and you don't have to face a full-strength Nuggets squad or a full-strength Lakers squad. Anyways, that, I guess, is the overall just initial impressions of the schedule. Let's take a quick break, and then I'll come back and talk about this Team USA Greece exhibition and then talk about the Grizzlies' opportunity to add an extra player while Ja Morant is suspended. I want to tell you guys about Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is a whole new way to play fantasy sports for cash. My favorite way to play Underdog Fantasy is with their private drafts. They have every sport, so right now you can do daily fantasy baseball against your friends. Also, depending on the state you live, you can play higher or lower against their stat projections and really bring home some big paydays with their specials and multipliers. And of course, there's fantasy football best ball. Those lobbies are now open and busy as people get excited for the upcoming NFL season. So if all that sounds appealing to you, sign up now using promo code FBBF, and they will match your first deposit up to $100. That is promo code FBBF, as in Fast Break Breakfast, for a match of $100 on your first deposit. Sign up for Underdog Fantasy and use that code FBBF to get a free $100 on me. Okay, early on Friday, Team USA took on Greece in an exhibition from Abu Dhabi, and Team USA beat Greece rather easily. They got out to a big lead in the first quarter and then kind of stumbled through the final 3 quarters, but it was enough for a comfortable victory. Anthony Edwards led the way. This Greece team did not have Giannis Antetokounmpo. It did not have former Grizzlies legends Nick Kalathis, Antonis Fotis, or Costa Koufos. It was, I think, frankly, a little bit undermanned. The only players you might be familiar with, Giorgio Papagiannis was there, Thomas Walkup, and of course Thanasis Antetokounmpo played, but they did not have the talent to match up with Team USA. Jaren had, I would say, a run-of-the-mill good game. He made all 3 of his field goal attempts. They were all in the paint near the basket. He picked up a block, affected some other shots, and finished with 11 points, got 3 rebounds and that block. So not a lot to talk about, or not a lot of analysis needed for this game. Jaren had one where he took it coast to coast, finished with the left hand after getting a foul, and then they found him. He just basically overwhelmed his defender for his 3 baskets. He definitely had an advantage over whoever was guarding him. The final exhibition for Team USA is Sunday against Germany. I will probably do another playback. I've done a playback for the last 3 exhibitions. I believe I'm still available for that one. So let's go ahead and pencil that in. I'll see you on Sunday at playback.tv/fastbreak. Breakfast. That's the last exhibition before the World Cup starts a week from Saturday on August 26th when they take on New Zealand. During that playback, someone asked me a question about the roster hardship or the suspension exception basically you get for the Grizzlies. And this is something I haven't talked about much on the show because frankly, I didn't know much about it. But the Grizzlies, while Ja Morant is suspended, once he has served 5 games of his suspension, they can place him on a thing called the suspended list and sign an additional player to their roster. They can add a 16th person to their roster. This is not a 2-way slot. They can use a regular roster spot on adding a different player. Now, once Ja Morant's suspension is up, then they have to waive him to get back down to 15 players. So for Game 6, if the Grizzlies elect to, if they've had any form of injuries, if, Derrick Rose has proved to be ineffective, if Steven Adams doesn't look as healthy as we hope, or if there's been another bump or bruise that's affected player availability, the Grizzlies might just pick up a guy who they think best fits the team need, whether that is a ball handler or if it is another big man. Maybe it's even a wing player that they're interested in, they want to see more of. But it's something I hadn't thought that much about, whether they would go the route of trying to find a veteran who was unsigned, who they thought could help the team, or just be an emergency substitute if needed for a game, or if they would use it on someone they're interested in, maybe for the Memphis Hustle, or maybe trying out for a two-way spot. Now, they wouldn't use that, or there's no benefit of using that on your current two-way players, which is Vince Williams Jr. and Jacob Gilyard. Those guys are still available to play. Jacob Gilyard, by the way, still on that two-way deal. And also, Gigi Jackson, for whatever reason, still hasn't signed his two-way deal or been offered the two-way deal. I don't know what the details are there, why that hasn't happened. What are the benefits for anyone for not having completed that yet? But I do think it's interesting that once this season starts and after the Grizzlies play 5 games, they are eligible to then add another player to the team. So that'll be fun to monitor exactly what the Grizzlies do with that opportunity. Just another interesting twist for the Ja Morant suspension. And that is everything for today's show. I know we're all having fun looking at the Grizzlies schedule, trying to predict how many games they're going to win. I'm trying to set my schedule for when I'm going to go to Memphis, when I'm going to host watch parties in Nashville, Tennessee. And, of course, now that we see the dates written down, we can almost feel it and get excited for another year of NBA basketball. Anyways, thanks you guys for listening. Remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Write me a review on iTunes if you don't mind. Give me another 5-star iTunes review. If you want to support this show's creation directly and get access to exclusive bonus content, and if you want to play fantasy football or basketball with me, well, then become a Patreon supporter. Patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast is the most direct way to support the creation of this show. And you also, of course, like I just said, can play fantasy sports with me. You can also join the listener Slack channel. We have a Grits and Grinds channel in our Slack. You can talk about whatever Grizzly stuff you want around the clock. Anyway, consider doing that. Patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right. Hope you guys have a great Friday. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.